World War II. A name that sounds familiar. A war you think you already understand. Germany, Hitler, the Allies, victory, defeat. But history has a habit of showing us only what it wants us to see. Because the real story of World War II was never written for the public. It was hidden, buried, classified. What if the war didn't begin the day bombs started falling, but years earlier, in secret meetings, behind locked doors, between men who already knew millions would die? By the early 1930s, the world was not peaceful. It was preparing. Governments were quietly rebuilding armies. Factories were secretly shifting to weapon production. Scientists were being funded, not to heal, but to destroy. World War II was not a sudden explosion. It was a long, calculated plan. While newspapers spoke of diplomacy and peace, intelligence agencies were mapping targets, studying human endurance, and testing how far the human body could be pushed before it broke. And when the war finally became visible to the world, it was already too late. Millions of young men were sent to fight. Most of them never understood why. They were farmers, students, factory workers. They were told they were defending freedom. But many of them were defending decisions made by people they would never meet. On the battlefields, death was fast. Bullets, bombs, fire. But away from the cameras, death was slower. In underground facilities, prisoners were stripped of their names. They became numbers. In freezing chambers, scientists watched humans die from cold, just to measure time. In sealed rooms, people were injected with diseases, not for survival, but for observation. No mercy, no consent, no record. Entire villages disappeared, not bombed, not evacuated, erased. And when the war ended, when flags were raised and victory speeches were made, justice was selective. Some criminals were punished, others were protected. Because knowledge was power. Scientists who helped design death were quietly transported across oceans, given new identities and new careers. The same minds that served dictators now served democracies. Their pasts were erased, but their research lived on. Soldiers returned home, but not all of them. Hundreds of thousands were listed as missing. Families waited years, decades, without answers. Some prisoners were never released. Some were forced to rebuild the very nations that destroyed their lives. The war may have ended on paper, but for many, it never ended at all. Then came the moment that changed humanity forever. A single bomb, a blinding flash, a city erased. Then another. In seconds, entire generations vanished. Officially, it was done to save lives, to end the war faster. But behind closed doors, leaders spoke of power, fear, and control. The message was clear. This is what we can do. And from that moment on, the world lived under a shadow of total destruction. After the war, new enemies were created. New threats were invented. New wars were planned, without ever being declared. The fighting moved into intelligence agencies, covert operations, proxy nations. World War II didn't disappear. It evolved. The technology you use today, the borders on maps, the governments in power, all trace back to choices made in that era. And yet, so much of it remains untold. Because truth is dangerous. History is written by those who survive, but silence is chosen by those who benefit. The real legacy of World War II is not just victory or defeat. It is secrecy. It is unanswered questions. It is shadows that still follow us. And the more you look into the past, the more you realize, some wars never truly end. They just learn how to hide.